In Buddhist Abhidhamma Philosophy, reality or existence is divided into four ultimate constituents, which are expressed as four ultimate truths, four Paramattha, which are matter, mind, consciousness, and Nibbāna. And in this video, I will give a brief overview over these four ultimates of Buddhist Abhidhamma philosophy. So let us begin with matter. In Pali, Rūpa. Now, matter is usually talked about in two different ways. One is in matters of the four primary elements of earth, water, fire, and air. And the other is in matters of the body with its sensory organs. But first, let us begin with the four primary elements. When Buddhists talk about the earth element, they do not primarily mean the earth that you find under your feet. Rather, in Buddhist philosophy, earth refers to the characteristics of solidity, concrete, form, and weight. While in a similar manner, water as an element stands for fluidity, wetness, depth, and the quality of clarity. A similar thing holds true for the fire element, of which the concrete flame is just a concrete manifestation. So fire as an element refers to the qualities of heat, of radiation, and of light. While to the last element of air, the qualities of movement, of subtlety, and changeability are attributed. In short, all our experiences of inanimate matter are summarized in these four primary elements. But, as stated before, the four elements are only one way of understanding matter. A second way is through understanding the body and the nature of the senses, which stand for what in modern times we call organic matter. So first, the five senses are the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and the body, which allow us to see, hear, smell, taste, and feel, and which by that have a direct relation with the mind, which we will talk about in greater detail afterwards. Then the contemplation of the body forms a very central aspect of Buddhist practice, allowing us to get to know ourselves more intimately. So a Buddhist practitioner is encouraged to perceive within his own body organs such as his digestive organs, his heart, his brain, and whatever other organs he can know through direct perception. But as a next step, he too should try to perceive what processes arise independent of these organs. So he might try to perceive the whole process of digestion and how that in turn brings nutriment or energy to the body, which turns on the senses, and the process of breathing, which allows the heart to pump blood through the body, which makes the brain function, as well as allows for the various processes of all the other organs. These processes in turn lay at the basis of all mental processes. So the mind is in a sense, just by virtue of its foundation, something even more process-like than the body. Nevertheless, we can still perceive the mind in the form of distinct states of mind. So conditions of mind like anger or greed or delusion, or on the opposite side, wisdom or joy or love or bravery. These all are conditions of the mind, which in turn still can be subdivided and further analyzed into feeling, perception, thought, intention, attention, and so on. So different mind states all have their own minds, their own feelings, their own intents and thoughts, and so on. So this is all included in the category of mind. But then there is a phenomenon which essentially belongs to both the category of mind and of consciousness, where both are inextricably bound together, we can say. And that is a phenomenon of the mental process. So the mental process is used to describe the mind and consciousness as a series of phases, starting with a condition of utter unconsciousness, which gradually evolves into greater intensity of conscious life and activity. So this process evolves from unconsciousness over the semi-conscious mental life that is experienced in dreams, to the experience of sights, sounds, smells, and so on, which with still greater intensity of consciousness and mental life are investigated, thought about, memorized, and intended upon. So this is the basic sequence of the mental process. But then, even though in this we find mind and consciousness very interrelated, we can talk about consciousness in a more isolated manner. So, in Buddhist Abhidhamma philosophy, consciousness often somewhat includes karma and is strongly interwoven with karma. Hence, consciousness in Abhidhamma is our individual way of perceiving the world, and through its aspect of karma is actually equally strongly connected with the sphere it is aware of. So in Abhidhamma, consciousness is often divided into sense sphere consciousness, fine material sphere consciousness, immaterial sphere consciousness, and path consciousness. However, it seems a good idea to differentiate consciousness of the sphere of pain or of suffering from sense sphere consciousness, in which it is traditionally included, hence making 5 spheres of consciousness. So let us take as a first Apaya Bhumi, consciousness in the sphere of pain. This is a consciousness that we basically become through becoming for prolonged period of times immersed in depression, anxiety, regrets, traumas, and so on. So if we become too identified with these negative states of mind, we basically begin to live a ghost-like, if not a hell-like existence. Next, we have sense sphere consciousness. This is our native human consciousness. And its basic mechanism is to strive to find happiness in the sphere of the senses. So that is what most human beings do, essentially. But then some beings start to see the suffering nature in living a purely sensual existence. So they begin to develop an interest in finer things. And in as much a person is able to actually perceive and respond to finer matter or finer things, he begins to enter the sphere of fine material sphere consciousness. So this condition of consciousness we can find in people who do energy work, like energy healing, or who feel like having a direct connection with some higher entity, or those who can gain direct perceptions of energy in meditation. Then some people, through disregard for the things of the senses and through disregard for mere energy work, develop a consciousness that immerses itself in immaterial things. This is a consciousness of a very developed meditator or a scientist who truly is able to enter a sphere of pure abstraction, whether regarding the material universe or the mental cosmos. Lastly, we have the path-directed consciousness. So if a person is following a spiritual path, and by that aims at overcoming all imperfections and all worldliness, then he begins to lose interest in exploring any of the previous spheres, unless he can see some relation of them to a spiritual path. So the main characteristic of this consciousness is to seek perfection. And that is a note to our last Paramattha, our last ultimate of Buddhist philosophy, which is Nibbāna. Now, Nibbāna is the fruit of a path-directed consciousness. So a consciousness that inclines towards perfection and follows a certain path that points in that direction. The fruit thereof is Nibbāna. Hence, Nibbāna is a reality which transcends imperfection and conditionality. And it has as the last category of the fundamental realities of existence quite an overlap with the conceptions of God that we find in various other religions. However, there are also important distinctions. So, Nibbāna is a transcendent reality and as such transcends conditionality as well as all the previous fundamental realities. It is not in them or causing them, as is often conceived of in the case of a god. Neither is it personal, as personality belongs to the reality of consciousness. It is deathless, timeless, unconditional, and largely ineffable. Nevertheless, it is much like the more refined conceptions of God that we find in other religions, regarded as the highest good. And closeness to it, similar to most religions, is gained by increase in virtues such as goodness, purity, inner unity, and understanding. And especially an understanding of the nature and conditionality of the previous three realities is not only crucial, but a necessary precondition for its direct realization. So the sage who is in contact with Nibbāna is virtuous, internally unified, and wise. And that may be all that can be said about the transcendent reality. So these are the four paramattha of Buddhist philosophy. Thus, the four paramattha, matter, mind, consciousness, and Nibbāna, represent the fundamental realities of existence in Buddhist philosophy. They offer a framework for understanding our experience from the tangible world of the body through refined states of mind, culminating in the transcendence of Nibbāna. But let us not forget that while these categories help us to analyze reality, true wisdom lies not merely in conceptual understanding, but in direct experience. So the path of practice, through contemplation, through insight, and through virtue, allows us to move beyond intellectual knowledge to direct realization. So ultimately, the purpose of understanding these four paramattha is not just to describe reality, but to guide us towards liberation. So, and for those who truly seek it, the path is open.